Good evening, and welcome to another edition of the Rankin Mon Valley Pittsburgh section of the National Council of Negro Women. My name is Patricia Blewett, and I am the section's corresponding secretary. And joining me tonight is Alice Paylor Days, who is a member of the political committee for our section. We thank all of you who have participated in our previous programs and hope that you will join us again tonight by calling 412-853-8206 with questions or comments. And we already have a comment. One of our guests sent in a message and told us all to smile and have fun. So we're going to take that advice from that caller. The program today satisfies two of the National Council of Negro Women's national priorities to promote educational and encourage civic engagement. Today's program will also support the National Council of Negro Women's Good Health Wins initiative. Our guest today is Ronald B. Saunders, president of the Dr. Edna B. McKenzie branch of ASALH, along with two other guests, Dr. Archie Travis and Linda P. McDougall. Alice?
Show, we would like to introduce our special guests by reading their bios. Ronald B. Saunders is the current president of the Dr. Edna B. McKenzie branch, Pittsburgh, PA, of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, better known as ASALH. Ronald is an active member of the Corporate Equity and Inclusion Roundtable and is also a member of the African American Advisory Council to the Senator John Hayes History Center. Mr. Saunders is the founder of the newly formed Penn Hills Advisory Council to the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission. Welcome, and thank you for appearing on our program. And Ronald, would you please introduce Dr. Travis and Linda McDonald for the audience?
Dr. Artie Travis. Brother Travis is the Vice President of Student Affairs at Frostburg State University in Frostburg, Maryland. He is also the Vice President of Corporate, Academic, and Government Relations for the Dr. Edna B. McKenzie branch of ASALH. Linda P. McDougall is a retired librarian and elementary teacher and a long-standing member of the Dr. Edna B. McKenzie branch. The two of them have been invaluable assets to us on many different levels, and we welcome them.
Thank you. And Dr. Travis, would you mind doing the honors of telling us the recent award that Mr. Saunders received?
Well, certainly. I've been involved with the ASALH and the Dr. Edna B. McKenzie branch of ASALH for about 4 years now. Since I became involved with the branch, I've noticed that that Brother Saunders is a legacy in itself. All the work that he's been doing to advocate for Carter G. Woodson over the years made it possible for the Dr. Edna B. McKenzie branch to be recognized 2 years ago as the branch of the year for ASALH. Last year, for 2023, Dr. Janetta Cole and Brother Ron Sanders were the two recipients of the ASALH Living Legacy Award, which is one of the highest honors that are bestowed upon members in ASALH.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay. Can you tell us what ASALH stands for and what is the mission and the purpose of the organization?
Absolutely. The mission of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History is to promote, research, preserve, interpret, and disseminate information about Black life history and culture to the global community. ASALH was founded in 1915 by the esteemed Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who was the recognized father of Black history. the vision of this brother to find this organization at that period in American history in 1915. Just think about what was happening in 1915. You had Birth of the Nation. You had Woodrow Wilson inviting the Ku Klux Klan to the White House. And this brother, this scholar, born in New Canton, Virginia, had the audacity and gall and vision, intelligence to say, we need to record our story. We need to record our history. And his work would be the foundational basis for the African American History Museum that is presently in Washington, D.C. So we give praise and honor to those brothers and sisters who came before us to establish this organization, which lives in 40 other branches around the United States of America. In the past, we've had branches overseas in various foreign countries, etc. But ASALH, again, that mission is to promote the research, preserve, and interpret and disseminate information about Black life history and culture to the global community. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now, the history that you have documented, it's stored in the museum in DC?
Excuse me?
Mr. Saunders?
Yes.
The history that you have accumulated, where is it stored? Is it stored in the museum that you just mentioned, the African American Museum?
The information, you're talking about the information that Carter G. Woodson?
Yes.
Carter G. Woodson in the ASALH archives. We have the ASALH archives located in Washington, D.C., which has become a storehouse of information presently. The research, all his work from 1915 up to his passing in 1950 became the foundational basis for the African American History Museum. I mean, his book, Miseducation of the Negro, the Carter G. Woodson Appeal, and his other groundbreaking works became the basis of why we have these African American museums, particularly the museum in DC, which is part of the Smithsonian, in which many of our folks in the audience, as well as members, have actually seen and gone before. So upon that brother's shoulders, we witness the foundational basis for what we do today and celebrate that.
Okay. Great. How did ASALH
And
become
what year
involved
was
in
the doctor?
I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Alice.
Let me just
No,
interject
I was going
before.
to ask him,
When it started
what
in
year was the
1915,
Dr. Etney?
let me just clarify. When Brother Woodson started the organization, it was the Association for the Negro Study of Life and History. So that name didn't change until 1973. It was always the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, which was the same mission since 1950. I just wanted to make that point. The Dr. Edna B. McKenzie branch was birthed into existence in 2012. We had the annual conference meeting in 2012 in Pittsburgh. And Sister McKenzie passed in 2005. But her vision was always to have a branch. Her vision was always to have a branch in Pittsburgh. And so it took them 4 to 6 years to put together the basis for establishing a branch. And we received our charter on October the 13th in 2012, the Dr. Edna B. McKenzie branch, named after Dr. Edna B. McKenzie, who was the first African American female to obtain a PhD in history from the University of Pittsburgh. She was the first. She was also the first pioneering female journalist at the Pittsburgh Courier at the time, not the new Pittsburgh Courier. That name didn't change until the 1960s. She was the first female reporter. So you see upon whose shoulders we stand on, Brother Woodson and Sister McKenzie. Their work, their dedication to their craft of excellence is what brought us here today. As I told the folks on Negro Mountain in that ceremony on October the 12th, I wouldn't be sitting on a mountaintop in Maryland if it wasn't for the great work, outstanding work of Dr. Carter G. Woodson. He provided the mechanism, the branches that we live through the branches, our legacy We do the work centered on that mission through the branches. Thank you.
Okay. Now, you mentioned the Negro Mountain. So, how did ASALH become involved in the commemoration and dedication of Negro Mountain?
How did ASALH become involved? Okay, let me make a point of clarification. The Dr. Edna B. McKenzie branch became involved in Negro Mountain, along with its partners in the state of Maryland, the two ASALH branches, the Prince George's County Truth Branch, and the Samuel L. Banks branch in Baltimore, along with the brother that you are sitting here today witnessing, Dr. R.D. Lee Travis, Vice President of Student Affairs of Frostburg State, as well as two NAACP chapters, thanks to Brother Travis's efforts, along with the Garrett County Historical Society, along with three different Maryland governmental bodies of state government. That's how we became involved in adopting the mountain. We adopted the mountain in 2018. 2018, we adopted the mountain through Maryland's Adopt a Highway campaign. And what does that consist of? We're required to go to the mountain and clean the mountain 4 times a year. And in adopting the mountain, we wanted to teach the history of the African American frontiersmen and obviously to help keep Western Maryland clean. So that's how we got involved. And I said, basically, I'll tell you how it really started. We were out on just driving around the Maryland countryside. And we happened to stop on Negro Mountain. We asked the Mennonite couple at the bottom of the mountain, well, how does one reach Negro Mountain? This is back in 2018. And so the Mennonites pointed us, well, you go up to the top. So we went up to the top and we noticed in the marker description of the mountain, it was very difficult to read the encasement of the Negro Mountain story. So I said, this doesn't look like this glass has been cleaned in years. So Brother Saunders called up the Maryland Department of one of the district offices, and I talked to the receptionist. I said, we were at Negro Mountain the other day, but, we had difficulty reading what you had enclosed in the African-American marker description. And she said, well, we haven't had anyone clean the mountain in years. She said, we had an elderly couple and they basically died off. And I said, well, it's very difficult. You have tourists coming from all over, travelers. I said, you need to clean your glass so we can actually read this important history of this African-American frontiersman. So she said, well, Mr. Saunders, why don't you and your organization adopt the mountain? So we took the challenge. We said, yes, we would do that. We filled out papers. We signed a 2-year contract. And our first meeting on the mountain, if you recall, was October the 27th, 2018. We had a very fine cleanup of the mountain. We were fulfilling our obligations under the contract, which required, again, us to go to the mountain 4 times a year and to clean up the mountain, but basically policing the mountain. This was our first trip to the mountain was October 27, 2018. What stands out about that is that this was the same day of the Tree of Life massacre in Pittsburgh at Squirrel Hill at the temple. This was the same day. That was our first cleanup. So that's how, based upon a phone call and an invitation to clean the mountain, why don't you adopt the mountain, Mr. Saunders? And this is how we got involved in the African-American frontiersmen, which ultimately finally led to a historic marker, which became the first in Garrett County, Maryland. I hope that is clear on how we got involved, the Dr. Edna B. McKenzie branch. Now, on top of the mountain, Negro Mountain is located on the highest point on the national road. This national road runs from the state of Maryland.
On which road?
The national road. That's Route 40.
Okay.
Route 40. That's the national road. Black folks helped build that road. They built most of that road. The national road runs from Maryland to the state of Illinois. The Negro Mountain site that we adopted is the highest point on the national road. There are two Dr. Edna B. McKenzie signs atop Negro Mountain, which says Dr. Edna B. McKenzie, the association abbreviated for the study of African American life and history. Now, Negro Mountain starts in the state of Pennsylvania. That was one of the questions. Negro Mountain starts from the Castleman River in Somerset County, and it runs all the way over to Deep Creek, Maryland, which is not too far from Frostburg. That's in the same neighborhood. So Negro Mountain.
Okay.
So we adopted Negro Mountain, which is on the Garrett County side, the Maryland side of the mountain. Pennsylvania, the highest point in Pennsylvania is Mount Davis, and that's at the summit of Negro Mountain. That's the highest elevation in Pennsylvania, 3,026 feet. And the highest point on the national road, I'm making the distinction, is Negro Mountain in Garrett County, Maryland. Thank you.
Okay. We're going to show the plaque that you were talking about, the new one, I believe. And would you
Yes.
like to comment on the plaque for us?
Okay, now I'm going to refer to Brother Travis to get to other folks. Okay, the Negro Mountain Commemoration Historic Plaque, we had a ceremony. What was required? We had many, I had to write a 600, 700 word statement of facts to support this historic marker, Negro Mountain African American Historic Site. Okay, we collaborated with the Maryland Department of Transportation, the Maryland Department of Maryland Historic Trust, Frostburg State University president sent a letter of support. Two NAAC pre-branches, one in Garrett County as well as Allegheny County, Maryland, sent letters of support. The Garrett County Historical Society sent a letter of support. The Garrett County administration sent a letter of support. And we had a brother who was a former Maryland delegate in the 12th District of Maryland, Clarence Taggart Davis. He sent a letter of support. So all those different letters of support, along with my statement of fact, went into Maryland accepting our statement of fact as getting this historical marker to preserve the story of the African American frontiersman. Understand that this was the first historic plaque in Garrett County, Maryland. This is a branch in Pittsburgh, 92 miles away from its base, impacting the history in Garrett County, Maryland, where they get their first Black history marker, historic marker. And Brother Travis, you can fill in all the other details because Brother Travis provided the program flyer. He provided trips up and down the mountain to tell us what was going on with the mountain, what condition the mountain was. He involved students from Frostburg State. But Brother Travis, I refer to.
Well, let me first say that Brother Saunders is a little modest. Second, let me just say that the executive board of ASALH and all the people that Brother Saunders reached out to were involved. But when I just think about the Journal of Negro History, which is published by ASALH, you folks out there need to know that living history is Brother Saunders. Brother Saunders led the effort to make sure that the Maryland Department of Transportation and all the other organizations and branches that we talked about bought into this process. The first and most important thing is that Brother Saunders made sure that as far as research is concerned, that name on that mountain was the appropriate name. He did research, discovered that what people thought was the name of that African-American Negro frontiersman. He made sure that we were dealing with facts, not fiction. Second, he pulled all these stakeholders together in Pennsylvania, in Maryland, all the way down to the DC area to make sure, one, that that he promotes and ASALH promotes a commitment to self-determination and unity. And if we do not understand and know the history of where we're from, we're going to be destined again to go to where we don't want to go. When I
Exactly.
look at what Brother Saunders and the executive board of the Dr. Edna, Edna B. McKenzie branch has done, what they have done is to make sure that our history is a living history. Negro Mountain, whatever people want to take as far as that name, we are proud of who we are, and the fact that mountain is there and is presented as the first historic marker in Garrett County is significant. I think also the fact that Brother Saunders has been leading this effort, which is the reason why he is a living legacy for ASALH. Other organizations and groups are trying to do the same thing. I know that the oldest church, which is the African American church in Frostburg, is now seeking to get a historic marker in Frostburg. There's also a church in Garrett County, which will be the second African American marker, but that again would not have happened without the impetus and the leadership of Brother Ron Saunders. My work was just to make sure that one, our students understood that this was important. Our community understood this is important. We've had so many struggles in this country since Carter G. Woodson started the Journal of Negro History, started ASALH. We can't forget, and this is not just a little small piece, it is a significant piece to make sure that we know where we came from in order for us to go forward to do that. So that effort again, not just Brother Saunders, but that entire executive board of the Dr. Edna B. McKenzie branch of ASALH made this happen and brought us along with him as he was doing this.
Thank you, Brother Travis.
Thank you. Alex, do you want to take the next question? Or
Dr. Travis, do you know why the state of Maryland took down the highway markers indicating where Negro Mountain is located?
Now, I've been in Maryland. I lived down at Bowie State University for a number of years. I didn't even know that it was here. The first time I drove out, I saw it, and I was proud of the fact that it was a Negro Mountain. So I'm not certain who has the history of it, but I think that it may have been small-minded individuals. It may have been other folks that advocated because they may have not been as proud as we are of our history. I mean, we defined for ourselves that we were Negroes. We defined for ourselves that we were African American. We defined for ourselves that we were Black Americans. We defined all those things, and that is what that African American Negro frontiersman was when he fought with Colonel Cressup to try to defend this part of the country. So I can't tell you exactly why, but I think whoever decided to move it, I think if they had a sit down lunch with Brother Saunders, they probably wouldn't have removed it when they did.
Right. Based
okay.
upon them
So
moving
the
it,
sign that you showed,
based upon them moving it,
the sign that
this
you
has
showed is
resulted in
still
a
on the mountain.
commemoration. I'm sorry?
The sign that was
used to,
shown on the
sign,
screen, is it still on the mountain?
The
No,
sign used to be on 68.
Right.
But
the sign were on 68 and Route
Yeah.
40. The
Yeah.
signs they moved
Okay.
were elevation signs. They were highway signs that said Negro Mountain. What we accomplished through this long, relentless effort with stakeholders that Brother Travis just so eloquently talked about was to get a historic marker. This will stay into perpetuity. This won't be removed. We're the Dr. Edna B. McKenzie branch is the custodian of this historic marker, which says Negro Mountain, African American historic site. So we turn the negative of them taking the elevation signs down into a positive. And this is what ASALH is about. And this is what the Dr. Edna B. McKenzie branch was about. This is what, if they probably don't take those elevation signs down, we might not have at this point that historic marker in Garrett County, Maryland, to Dr. Travis's point, which became a first. Anytime you do something for the first time, it's just like when Jackie broke the color bar in 47. People always remember Jackie Robinson. They always will remember
Hmm.
Jackie Robinson. He broke that color bar. So we were glad not only that we get hung up on first, but it was the right thing to do. It was the right thing to do to restore the history of this African American frontiersman, that we tell the story of our history. We don't want someone you can take us down, you can do whatever, but we still rise and we're going to tell our story, to Brother Travis's point. So we're going to tell the story. We're going to tell the story accurately.
Okay, thank you. What collaborations or partnership has ASALH established in the Pittsburgh community?
I will refer to Mrs. Linda McDougall, who's been the coordinator of our
Okay.
Woodville Plantation Project. The Woodville Plantation Project is something the Dr. Edna B. McKenzie branch. When we say ASALH, I have to correct and say the Dr. Edna B. McKenzie branch of ASALH
Okay.
with the Woodville Plantation. Linda, I refer to Linda P. McDougall.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Woodville
Yes.
Plantation was a working plantation that had the enslaved people. And it is about 20 minutes from downtown Pittsburgh.
Mm.
Periodically, the Edna B. McKenzie branch would meet with representatives from the Woodville Plantation to see how we could partner together to explore this slavery. And we were in our discussions, we suggested that they build a replica of a slave cabin, which they did. And it is authentic on the outside and on the interior. We were invited this year to their presentation, their Juneteenth presentation, although slavery ended on the Woodville Plantation in 1803. And we learned that they weren't all just field workers. They were the enslaved. They were carpenters, skilled iron workers, distillers of whiskey, and we even learned some of their names. And the presentation was excellent. And so our ultimate plan is to partner with the schools so that our school children can learn about slavery in Western Pennsylvania. So that is my main project. I want to get the children involved in learning about our history in
Okay.
Western Pennsylvania.
Thank you,
Okay.
Linda.
Yeah, thank
And
you.
Also,
what
last
schools
year,
have you involved so far?
Dr. Glasgow, Ron, you may want to talk about Dr. Glasgow, what he does.
now, Doctor, in terms of the Woodville Plantation,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah.
Our primary emphasis with the Woodville Plantation is, look, you have this plantation here, and all these black folks are out here working, and they brought you all this wealth. So you need to depict and tell their story accurately, as Linda so eloquently stated. And this is how we got it started. Dr. Glasgow, who's a member of ASALH, the Dr. Edna B. McKenzie branch, has been bringing University of Pittsburgh student groups to the plantations since 2000. This has been ongoing to teach the history of the Woodville plantation, because often we think of plantations, to Linda's point, we just think of the antebellum South and Southern plantations.
Mhm.
We had slavery with deep roots right here in Western Pennsylvania. So University of Pittsburgh has been there. Local schools in the Washington County area have actually been there to witness. So we hope to improve on that by bringing African American school age kids from predominantly African American communities like the inner city to the plantation to teach that history. But during the pandemic, we were sort of hampered since 2019. Now that things are opening back up, that is one of our goals, is to actually educate many of our school kids, black, white, etc., on what is going on at the Woodville plantation. And if you look at our program we did last year with the Harriet Tubman Guild, that was a collaboration, and many of your members of the council, members of the Harriet Tubman Guild. That was a collaboration where we had Harriet Tubman Day declared by the city of Pittsburgh, the mayor of Pittsburgh. We received a proclamation. We had the great great grandniece of Harriet Tubman involved in that collaborative program. And it was all about Harriet Tubman and declaring Harriet Tubman Day in the city of Pittsburgh. We had a park ranger from Maryland who was involved, who done extensive research on Harriet Tubman. And she had gone back and found out things that the movie didn't even talk about, the movie that we talked about at Harriet Tubman. We had one of our other branch members, Patrick McFay, who did exceptional work from another angle on many of the things we didn't know Harriet Tubman, because she was a great naturalist. And he pointed that out, that Sister Tubman was doing things maybe 60 and 70 years ahead of her time in the context of being a naturalist. So we had other scholars involved giving information about Harriet Tubman's life that we didn't know. So that was a great collaborative program done with the Harriet Tubman Guild. We also were involved this past spring on the Negro Motors to Greenville with the Heinz History Center. We were involved in that program. We were involved with the Heinz History Center also on a collaborative on the Martin Delaney Symposium. And that's been ongoing with the Dr. Edna B. McKenzie branch. We were heavily
Mr.
involved.
Saunders,
Yes.
Mr. Saunders, I want to just stop you for a moment because we
Sure.
have a caller on the line,
Okay,
and
absolutely.
we have Tammy Saunders, and Tammy would like to welcome you, and you may ask your question.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Tammy.
Tammy, can you hear us? We're having a difficult time hearing you. Can you speak a little louder, please?
I hear a little bit in the background. I can't.
Can,
How's
right.
this? Work better?
Yes, we can hear.
Yes,
That's
we can
much
hear you.
better. Much better.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, I would like to thank all of the presenters this evening. Certainly learning a lot. But I wanted to just, if anyone could highlight some of the primary resources that were used in order to name the mountain Negro Mountain. What were some of the historical resources that were used in your research?
Okay, what were some of the resources? Very good question, Tammy. One of the resources we used was an article in the Maryland Gazette, and that is dated 1756. When historians and students of history and researchers look at information, they look for resources. They look for primary resources, not tales made up. And that was the primary resource, was the article in the Maryland Gazette of June 24th, 1756, and also a companion article in Benjamin Franklin's Pennsylvania Gazette, which is considered primary sources, which identify the incident on the mountain in question with the African American frontiersmen. It talked about who, what, when, where, how it happened. That was our primary source of information that we use in my statement of fact to the Maryland Trust, who are the folks that decide on whether you get the historical marker, et cetera. That was my primary source of information. And I'm sorry we don't have a copy of that. I do have copies here of the Maryland Gazette as well as the Pennsylvania Gazette, which are considered primary sources of information. This is what historians look at. They look at newspaper articles, they look at consensus, they look at roles, they look at various other things, they look at facts, not things that are concocted and made up. So that's what we use. It says basically in there that an African American frontiersman saved the life of Colonel Cressup on the mountain in question on a ridge. It talks about a ridge, didn't have a mountain. We even took it a step further to see, well, what did the indigenous call this ridge that later became Negro Mountain? We can't find anything in the record that shows that the indigenous called the mountain anything. And some things we simply just don't know at this point. This is 2023. We simply don't know if there was an indigenous name. Because certainly when I contacted Russell Sims, executive director of the Council of Three Rivers, who's a good friend of mine, and he said, Ron, many of those things just didn't have a name. He said maybe they used paths and streams and rivers, they used indigenous names, but some things
You've
just
got a
didn't have
lot
them.
of background on your phone. I'm going to have to hang up.
Okay. Does that answer the question, Tammy?
I'm sorry. Go ahead again, Ron.
Tammy, does that answer your question? Many of the times we simply don't have a sources of information in terms of the indigenous. After all, the indigenous were here on the land in question. And then when I hear those questions about, well, what was the African American frontiersman doing on the ridge? We don't know. He probably came from Maryland, but this is speculation again. He probably came from the proprietary colony of Virginia and migrated into Maryland. Maryland was a slave state too. And often the record was clouded. I mean, you're talking about the 18th century. We have no other further information on his family, his name, and this wasn't uncommon. A lot of times the record was obscured. Trying to go and look, there were no census records in the 18th century, particularly on African Americans who were still at that time considered 3/5 of property. So we looked at the primary sources of information being in the Pennsylvania Gazette and the Maryland Gazette. I looked at that, I vetted that, cross-examined it. We can find no other competent information about the story of how the mountain. And so Colonel Cressup gave the name Negro Mountain because of the brother who saved his life and members of his party. He was involved in a skirmish with indigenous Americans. Now we have to say that I have to point out this fact, and I want to make this clear. This was at a time of the French and Indian War. Part of the playbook of Europeans is always to put people against each other. We know that. The French had their allies, and the British had their indigenous allies. It just so happens that Colonel Cressup was with the Brits. The brother was with the Brits. He was a frontiersman. There are very few African American frontiersmen that we can relate to of the 18th century. So he was with them. They set out on a party from Fort Cumberland, Maryland, and they were engaged in a firefight with these indigenous who were the allies of the French. Remember, the French were fighting the English. They were fighting in Africa. They were fighting in the Caribbean. They were fighting in Europe, and they were fighting in North America. This was the French and Indian War. All this is happening during the French and Indian War. You may have to make that clear because many people, students of history, they say, well, why did the indigenous kill him? Well, he was with the British. These are French allies. And the story of relationships between African Americans and indigenous American, it's a complicated relationship. It's a confusing relationship. It's a complex relation. Often it's one of hostile, sometimes it was amenable, sometimes it was friendly, and very often was confrontational and adversarial from the time we arrived in these shores from the day in 2023. I hope that answers Tammy's question.
Thank you. And we have a new caller on the line. We have Donna from Homewood. Hello, Donna. How are you?
Hi, how are you? Can you hear me?
Great, great, great. Can you talk a little louder, please?
Okay. I'm a little late getting on, but have you discussed anything about how some of the oppressors have been using the false label of critical race theory to prevent the teaching of our true history in this country? So far, I don't think we've had the firings and the bannings of books and so forth here in Pittsburgh related to that, but I'm just wondering how ASALH has been addressing that issue.
That issue was addressed in the ASALH National Conference, which was just recently held in Jacksonville, Florida. We've taken the position that we're going to be the captains of teaching our history, and we have no concern about critical race theory or any of those other things. We're going to teach our history. We're going to teach it accurately. And, we're just going to have that discussion and have that out there. But ASALH certainly took a position, has had a national position on critical race theory in terms of teaching our history because we've always been inundated with a Eurocentric curriculum from day one. From the time we entered grade school, from the time you graduate from history, that is a Eurocentric version of history. We always hear of Spot and Jane and Dick and Tom went up the hill to get a pail of water. We always hear the stories of Black Sambo, but we never hear those vibrant stories of those African-American children and boys and girls. ASALH has a very clear position, and we welcome you to come to our membership. We welcome you to come to our branch, but we definitely have been on the offensive to offset what they've done in Florida and Texas with all that nonsense about us teaching our history. We will be the captains of our ship and our story, and we will do it as long as we have vibrant live branches of ASALH. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. And I'm hoping that continues. I'm hoping that continues, but I'm also hoping that along with that, so we can do two things at one time. Maybe ASALH and the NAACP can get together and actually sue, because I think it's sue worthy for them to be allowed to, ban our books that are just telling the truth, and to fire our teachers who are just trying to tell the truth and things like that. So, I mean, I know that's a lot to put on, but I'm just wondering if maybe there's a way that can happen. But I do commend ASALH for all the work that they are doing and continue to do to educate us in our true history. And thank you. And this is a good program, and keep up the good work.
Thank you, Sister Donna.
Could I add just a little bit?
Yes, Brother Travis.
First and foremost, ASALH stood up to the criticism that some folks had to go into Florida. Florida, of course, it has not been friendly because of the politics there. They stood strong. They even set up a Sankofa Academy, where they invited instructors, teachers in the Jacksonville area and other areas to be able to better understand how to make sure that our history, which is combined with everyone, is part of what's happening. It's funny when people say, well, when you talk about slavery, you make white students sad. Come on. I also just wanted to add, when the previous question came up about collaborations and partnerships, I think there should be so many more folks in the Pittsburgh area and all the areas where there's a branch. Over the last 3 or 4 years, and again, I came into ASALH because of Tammy Saunders, who was a colleague of mine, and I said, why didn't you tell me about this years ago when she worked for me at Bowie State University? Since that has happened, collaborations, partnerships with the Dr. Edna B. McKenzie branch, Brother Saunders and the executive board, they have brought University of Pittsburgh into an affiliate membership. They've brought Frostburg State into an affiliate membership. When you talk about your goals of this program, education and civic responsibility, Brother Saunders and the other executive board members, they created the Charles Drew Quiz Bowl a couple years ago. They're going to do it again. That Charles Drew Quiz Bowl drew Frostburg State, Morgan State, Howard University, and Hampton University. 3 HBCUs and Frostburg. I'm happy to say that we beat 2 of the HBCUs in the Black History Bowl, but that has happened. I tell you, if people take a minute just to listen to the content that is happening with the Edna B. McKenzie branch, you will be so impressed and so full of yourselves as African Americans that you wouldn't know. Over the last 2 or 3 years, the executive board brought in a podiatrist. I didn't know I need to check my feet. And they talked about, making sure that we check our feet. After that program, I went and got a podiatrist to look at my feet. They brought in an African American farmer from down in
Hello,
Georgia.
and welcome to the PCTV show.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do I need to stop? Do I need to
No,
stop?
no,
Go
please
ahead.
continue.
Oh, they brought in a
No,
farmer.
continue.
Continue.
Okay, they brought in the farmer to discuss, and this young lady was 12 years old, to try to make sure that we are trying to reintroduce ourselves to the land that was stolen from us. They have brought in an attorney that talked about Pittsburgh as an apartheid city. You know, if anyone wants to get some history, and if anyone wants to stop critical race theory, they're not going to do it with the Edna B. McKenzie branch, because they stand up, they promote this history, they make history alive. And if there were so many more folks, particularly as we're going into this very dynamic, crazy political piece, because the executive board of Edna B. McKenzie, they have been out trying to recruit young people to be part of this. But anyone that's out there is listening. If you don't, if you want a membership to join Edna B. McKenzie, I will send Brother Saunders and Miss McDougal your membership fee so you can be part of Edna B. McKenzie for next year. You just, the first person that lets Brother Saunders know, I'll send the money in for your membership. Because you know what they say out there, the young people are saying FOMO, and that's fear of missing out. People who are not part of this are missing out. Just like I'm certain that the National League, the National Council of Negro Women, we got to get folks involved. In fact, I know that Brother Saunders has been encouraging his daughter Tammy to join in with the National Council of Negro Women, and I'm gonna challenge her to make sure that she gets her membership with y'all too, because all these groups working together are going to make sure that Black history is alive, that Black history is something that makes us proud of who we are as Black people.
Thank you, Brother
One of the
Travis.
things that happens whenever we have interesting programs like this, the time goes so quickly. So before we run out of time,
Oh,
are
wow.
there any upcoming events for 2023 that you would like to share with us?
Yeah, one of the things that Dr. Travis alluded to, we're having the Dr. Charles R. Drew Knowledge Bowl, which will come up during Black History Month, the second Saturday of the month. We plan on having the Dr. Charles R. Drew Knowledge Bowl. We're presently planning other programs for 2024 as we go forward, and we just are very enthusiastic about everything that we're doing and that we're actually doing. In that context, we have a great team. And our programming, Dr. Stephanie Body is the director of our program. She is actually a professor in Baylor University. Alexis Clipper is our secretary. Alana Carter is our esteemed historian. Dr. Artie Travis, as you've been hearing throughout the night, is our vice president of corporate academic relations. Dr. Anita Russell is our vice president of media relations. And the esteemed Dr. Madeline Turner Dickerson is our vice president of memberships and donations. Reverend Welsh, Reverend John Welch is our branch chaplain, and sister Dr. B. Denise Welsh, senior pastor, Bidwell Presbyterian Church, is our first vice president, and Judith E. Saunders is our treasurer, and Tammy Saunders is our executive producer, and her aunt Gwen is also our assistant producer who's been in. Let me just say one other thing. We had a national program for Black History Month last year. It involved the ASALH National, and that was a program titled Black Resistance in the Press. That involved Pittsburgh's own Rod Doss, who's editor publisher of the New Pittsburgh Courier. That involved a representative from the Washington Informer, the Baltimore Baltimore African American, an African American newspaper in Africa. And it also involved Tammy Saunders, who was also a panelist on that program. So that was one of our program this past June. And I have to talk about this because our collaborative programs have impacted so many people. We had a collaborative program on Juneteenth. We did that with one of the foremost scholars in the world on Juneteenth. This brother was Chris Mangerpraw. Chris Mangerpraw, scholar at Tufts University, involved in that program was the Rochester, New York branch of ASALH, the Manhattan branch of ASALH, and the Hampton Roads branch of ASALH. They were all involved in this Juneteenth program. And if you missed that program, this brother, based upon his scholarship, I mean, they consult with him on the reparations project that many cities, towns, and states are introducing, et cetera. And he just actually gave a history lesson on Juneteenth, what it is, what it isn't, et cetera. We found out that reparations were paid to the African Americans who were slave masters in the state of Texas. In other words, they don't tell you that backstory in Juneteenth. Reparations were paid to every slave master in the state of Texas when they released their enslaved captives. So there's so much to learn, in so many of our
Yes, there
programs.
is.
I could just go all day and all night when I get fired up, Brother
You know
Travis
what?
and Linda, just talking about ASALH and talking about our history and our story.
And you know what? It is exciting and entertaining and very valuable information that you're sharing. But before we thank
Oh,
our guests for appearing on our program again, we would like to say that the Good Health Women's Immunization Network, Good Health Wins, is our commitment to building an army of good health champions who understand the importance of immunizations across the lifespan. We want to educate, advocate, and impact families and communities across the United States to end the pandemic, address health disparities, and shine the light on the importance of good health. Through our network of trusted messengers and grassroots activities, our goal is to increase vaccination rates, help remove barriers, and increase access to vaccinations and good health. Alice,
Yes.
would you like to thank Ron
Ron
and
and Guess.
Yeah, can I
that's
just say
right.
one other thing, and I'll be
Yes, Ron and
remystified.
Guess.
In our opening ceremony on
Yes.
Negro Mountain, the first statement that was read was from your sister, Cheryl Maccabee. She is the president of
Oh,
your chapter. And Brother Travis read that statement into
Right.
the record. We have this historic relationship with these two organizations. They read Sister Maccabee's statement into the record. It became part of the ceremony on Negro Mountain. I just want to make that clear that I forgot to mention. There's so much going on, so many things going
oh,
on in my
wonderful.
head. And I just want to
On your
give
head.
props to Sister Maccabee, who, Sister Bethune was the longest serving president of ASALH. So we give her props that Brother Woodson had the vision to say, I'm going to get this sister. She's going somewhere. I mean, in the 1930s, the mid 30s, and he would say, Sister Bethune, we need you to come in the ASALH. And she would be the longest reigning president of ASALH is Dr. Mary Mathau Bethune, who was there from 36 to 51. She left a legacy. We talk about a legacy of Woodson, Mary Mathau Bethune, and all the other presidents that came behind. I just wanted to make that point clear there. Thank you.
And this
Okay,
is a
thank you for
man
that
who knows
information.
his history and doesn't mind sharing it. And we'd also like to thank our listening
Yeah.
audience for tuning in. And we invite you to join the National Council of Negro Women by calling 412 867 9641 9641 for a membership brochure. We need your help to educate, advocate, and positively impact families and communities in the greater Pittsburgh area. Remember, our live program airs on the first Friday of every month at 6 o'clock p.m. Please remember to get vaccinated. And thank you all for such a wonderful and interesting program. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
Thank
Merry
you.
Christmas. We can say that.
And happy
Thank you, Brother
Kwanzaa.
Travis. Frankie.